Yep, it is that time. This is Unfound Live for April 20th. Yes, I know what day it is. 2026. I hope everybody has had a great week since we all got together the last time. I have a fantastic, of course, and I say it every week. I mean it every week, and I come through every week. I have a fantastic show lined up for all of you tonight. Even though the show did not exist when the day started, had to get it all done today, put together everything that I wanted to discuss. Wanted to run by all of you, wanted to update you, open your minds, what other sayings that come into my brain. Just things that caught my eye over the past week that I want to discuss, and I thought all of you might find at least some of this stuff interesting as well. As you are watching / listening tonight, I hope you will give this show a thumbs up. I hope you will consider subscribing to the channel. I hope you will share this show, the channel, with whoever you think might find it interesting, add some enrichment to their lives. I hope you will do all of those things. And while you are watching / listening this evening, I hope you will hit the thumbs up button. You know, I say that every week. Maybe I do forget once in a while, but give it a thumbs up. And that's another way you can support, show your appreciation for the show and the channel in any way you can. And also, there are a variety of ways to support this podcast, everything that we do here at Unfound. You can go to patreon.com /Unfound podcast. You can go to paypal.me / Unfound podcast. You can, if you're watching on YouTube this evening, hit the join button below. Or if you are in the chat on YouTube, you can hit the super chat button and contribute that way. And of course, I will recognize you if you choose to do so. You might notice we have a new overlay. This is the overlay that I wanted to start using last week, but I messed it up how I set it up. I figured that out even before last Monday night was over. But you will see a new overlay here, and that is for the consulting that I'm doing now. Do you need help? If so, go to missingpersonsconsulting.com. And even if you don't need help, still go there. Maybe somebody else you know needs help. Or if you just want to see, well, what is Ed doing there? And you haven't been to this website yet. Just go there and check it out. missingpersonsconsulting.com. As for the title tonight, as I keep saying, I've been saying for a while, the topics that are guaranteed to be featured on a live show are always in the title for that live show. And you will see them here. First of all, I'm going to analyze the 1950s disappearance of Ronald Tammen. And you might notice that it's similar to a couple of disappearances that I've analyzed before. I want to talk about this the sensationalism regarding this UFO stuff. Of course, we had Just within, on the most recent Unfound now, I looked at the disappearance of 2 people. A lot of people are trying to connect these disappearances because these people both worked for the military, allegedly on UFO projects. Well, this wildfire of kookery is spreading, and now they're trying to involve multiple disappearances, multiple murders, all into one big conspiracy, because that's what conspiracy people do. I want to talk a little bit about that. So that's what I mean by the UFO stuff. And then finally, at least in the title, I posted in the discussion group on Facebook this very disturbing ring video just happened within the last couple weeks, where a guy shows up at somebody's house and he's yelling into the ring video and everything, and eventually works his way into the house, and the homeowner has to come home to confront this person. And I'm going to relate this to the Nancy Guthrie disappearance. Of course, we know how big of a issue that ring video is for her disappearance. Well, what happens when we come across a ring video, especially if it's recent, where we have another ring video of somebody at somebody's house? Can we, not saying this guy who did this caused Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, but maybe it helps explain people who go and do these types of things. So, like I said, if you haven't seen the video, it's in the discussion group. I would say it went viral. It wasn't just on YouTube, but I think some news stations also picked it up because it is so disturbing, just because of the way the guy's acting, the way he looks, what he's saying. It's broad daylight out. It's not in the middle of the night, and he's just standing there. He doesn't have a mask on or anything. He's right there for everybody to see. And what transpires after that. Can this give us some insight? And really, for me, it reinforces something that I say a lot about disappearances. So I'm not gonna be able to show that ring video here while I'm doing this live show. I'm gonna describe it to you, but you should make an effort to go find it for yourself, maybe in particular in the discussion group on Facebook. And then I have a lot of other things that I would like to get to tonight. We'll see how it goes. We just don't know. So let's see who is in here in the chat now that we're a few minutes in. I know some people will tune in late, and it is interesting that we usually have more people tuned in the second hour than the first hour, maybe contrary to a lot of other shows on YouTube. But anyway, hello, Charlie. What's going on? Good to see you, man. You got in early, 45 minutes early. Look at you, early for class. Fishing is in early as well. Hey, Fishing, what's going on with you? Lisa, good to see you. Hope you're doing well. Hope your son's finger is back to 100%. Amy, good to see you. Charlie, hello again. LaFord, what up? Good to see you. And Sub Rosa has asked me a question. Wow, let me read this. What does it say? Hey, Ed, if Florida law enforcement wanted you to be their exclusive missing persons consultant, but you had to work 9 to 5 at the police station, would you accept the position? Probably not, Subrosa. Once again, this sounds to me like I'm going to start answering to superiors and things like that. And that is, I don't know how I'd feel about that. I don't want my actions and thoughts and everything to be constrained by people telling me what to do. I figured that out a long time ago. I fear that I would just be taking instructions from people who know less than I do. And I don't think anybody ever wants to be in that position. When people can show me that they can make predictions, of course, as I've stated many times, I'm at like a 90% success rate as far as predicting the ends to disappearances. When people, can do it better than I do, maybe I'll start listening to them. If you want me to put me in charge of the whole thing, where I don't have to answer to anybody, then yes. But that's not going to happen. And of course, being in a government position, I don't know if it would give me the flexibility to do what I think needs to be done. And truthfully, I haven't had a boss since 2009. And it's been pretty nice as well. I'm a self-starter. I can figure things out. I know what you're asking, Sub Rosa, but this is why I'm starting my own consulting, independent of any. If police departments want to contact me, I'm easy to reach. I work for a very small fee. They want to send me it, I can do it that way. They want to send me files, I'll take a look at whatever they got, and I will give them a very structured analysis and my best opinion, of course, the 90% opinion on what is going on. But working actually within a very structured framework where I'm convinced that I'm probably the only person that really knows, really totally understands what's going on. That just sounds like somebody's just trying to put me behind a desk. So, and granted, I'm behind a desk, but you know what? I work from home. So Sabrosa, I appreciate the question. There's nothing that I can't do independently that I'm going to be able to do more so, working in a structure like that. I know in Texas and other states, they're giving, murder investigation files to college students and all of these things. I don't need to work within a structured framework like that for them to trust me too. So there you go. Hello. Yeah. Oh, good question. Hello, Mary. What's going on? D, good to see you. Lisa, I looked at my son's finger last night. Seems to have all movement back. Unfortunately, still no feeling in the fingertip. Hopefully that will resolve. You're so kind to ask about it. Well, you're very welcome, Lisa. And there's DD. Wonder Woman is here. And by the way, is Sub Rosa asking me a question like that? Any of you I know don't mention that as much as I used to. But if you have any questions you'd like to ask me, as long as they're not too personal, I will try to fit them in as we go tonight. Does not have to be missing persons or true crime related. So what has gone on since we all got together? I'll go through these things, my developments. You're very welcome, Sabrosa. What has gone on with me? Well, last Tuesday, I got a new tech system. I don't even know what to call it. Combination GPS, Bluetooth, radio, on and on and on. Something that really hooks to my phone. Really real Android Play system installed in my Mustang, and I'm loving it. And so now I can finally play my music off of Spotify and listen to podcasts and do whatever. The Waze app instantly comes on when I get in the car and start it up. So I got the little screen with the Waze, it's a GPS app right there, and it can split screen and everything. It's really cool. it's so this. What I got was, if you want to look it up, what I got was a Sony XAV 4000 system. So they took out the old system, and I've got this new one put in. Looks totally factory, and so it's Bluetooth and everything else. And one of the neat things is, of course, I can get phone calls and everything, of course. But if I get a text from somebody, the text will show up on the screen. And then all I have to do is hit reply, and all I have to do is talk, and it'll go voice to text. And then I hit send, and it'll send it back to the person. Boy, that's a lot safer than the way I used to do it in my Sonata. That's all I'm going to say with that. But it's fantastic. And surely I've not maximized its abilities yet. But now, I feel like I'm truly updated and everything, because of like the last 3 weeks since I got the car. Even, of course, I got tires put on it. But I really couldn't listen to my music because the Bluetooth system in the car was so rudimentary and everything else. It just wasn't good. So I am now updated on that. The next thing I'm going to do when I feel brave, and I already have all the stuff to do it, I'm going to change the spark plugs on it. And in those cars, you can do it yourself. In fact, these cars kind of are easy to work on if you want to do that. So I'm going to contemplate doing that over the next couple weeks. They say for a beginner, probably takes about an hour and a half. And so it's been a while since I've changed spark plugs in a car. So we shall see regarding that. But the car's been fantastic. Loving it. Drove it. My brother Brian came over. We drove it to see Night Ranger and Foreigner on Saturday evening. Of course, it was right over here, a couple miles, but that's pretty cool. And so it's really, it's been really, really good. Really enjoying it. On the car front, I actually had a serious buyer come and look at my Sonata today. And I hope it's good news that they want to come back tomorrow. They came today, looked at it, discussed a few things. They tried to get me down on the price. I, of course, told them the car's already discounted, being that I recognize it does have a few issues with it. And so they wanted to have somebody else to come take a look at it. So we'll see what happens. They say they're going to be here at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. The guys are real cool. They were probably here a half hour. And so maybe the Hyundai will be leaving me tomorrow. I hope so, because I have to carry insurance on it right now, and I'm not driving it, and it's not registered. So there's that. Nothing worse than having to pay insurance on a car that you can't drive. But luckily, the complex here is understanding, and about me having two cars and buying one other. And technically, given that I live in a 2-bedroom condo here, I'm entitled to another car anyway, even though I live by myself, because, once again, I have 2 bedrooms. So we'll see there. So on the car front, a lot of positive things happening. I just can't explain how much I am enjoying in this car. And in fact, late at night, after I get all my Unfound work done and everything, I'll just go out and take a spin. I think I forget what night I did that last week. I was working here at home, worked 11 o'clock or something. I was like, I'm just going to go for a little ride for like a half hour. So I went out and just drove around and came back. That's the kind of car I like to have, because that's what I used to do when I was in Pennsylvania, when I had my Mustang in the 1990s, that you just go out and cruise around and see what's going on. And I really never did that with the Sonata, because it was more utilitarian, let's say. But I'll let you know next week if I've sold the Hyundai. And thing is, even if I don't sell it tomorrow morning, somebody else wants to come and look at it tomorrow afternoon. So there's that. Night Ranger and Foreigner were spectacular. Unfortunately, Lou Gramm, lead singer of Foreigner, looking old. But he's had some health issues. He's had cancer, so I'm giving him a big break. He did get up and sing some songs, but Foreigner technically has a new singer who is fantastic. His name is Louis Maldonado. Fantastic. And Night Ranger, Jack Blades, Kelly Keegy, the rest of them, Brad Gillis, spectacular. They were really good opening up. I had seen Night Ranger 26 years ago at Sunset Station in Las Vegas with Loverboy. So that brings back memories of my Vegas days. It was May. It was right when I was starting at Star Trek, May of 2000. So there you go. Night Ranger, Foreigner, fantastic. Brother Brian came over. We had a great time. Had some good food, some kielbasa, sandwiches and everything. Great night. Beautiful night. Packed. And there were some women there, I'm here to tell you. And so it was a great night. Going to another concert this Friday at the same venue, Joe Satriani and Steve Vai. I've never seen either of them before. I think Brian's going to come back over for that one as well. See, Charlie, if you were here, you could be going with your uncles to some concerts. Just saying. Just saying. But we're having a good time with that. Trivia last week. Not as good as we could have done. We didn't take a 0, but some teams certainly passed us up. Knowing the final question, we were a little hesitant, and it showed. So we made it up to 5th place. Now we've fallen back to 8th. The season goes to the end of June. We got time. And didn't go on Saturday night because, once again, going to the concert. Been working on my tan a little bit, been getting out, and being that I've lost all this weight down into the 160, still about that 168, 169 level. Been going out and just relaxing on the beach for about 45 minutes every day. And so that's been nice, but still getting a ton of work done on a lot of different things, including the Atlantic Coast series. Did a couple interviews over this past week. My assistant Eric and I interviewed Lisa Molyneux, sister of Tony Schwark, again for that series. So getting a lot of work done, even though I'm also taking a little bit of time to catch some rays. But I'm not getting out there, not getting burnt. I have the alarm clock on my phone. When it dings, I'm out of there. So that's what's really been really has gone on since we all got together. I hope your week has been as productive and as nice as mine has. Sabrosa, I totally respect your knowledge on missing persons. Law enforcement would benefit greatly from your expertise. Another question, has any private investigator ever solved a missing persons case? I'm not going to say it's never happened, Sabrosa, but I'm sure it has. I think that there are enough private investigators since, let's just say, over the last 50 years, and there have been enough missing persons, missing children, missing adults, whoever, that I'm not saying it doesn't happen. But given, I don't know if any of those solutions were found, due to an investigation plan. Like I said, I'm not going to say it's never happened. I'm sure it has. But you wouldn't want to put any money on that. If you were a betting person on betting whether a private investigator is going to solve a disappearance. I'm not saying it's Powerball, jackpot odds, but it's just not very likely. So I'm guessing it has happened. Of course, the problem I have overall, being that you're asking, is that, a lot of private investigators say they've solved cases. Yeah, try to get them to list them. Try to get them to list them. There are a lot, you can find a lot of nonprofit groups asking for money. We've solved a lot of cases. We've done this, we've done that. No list on their website. 0. And it's not like, Plumbers, they get Yelp ratings. Restaurants get Yelp ratings. Car dealership get Yelp ratings. We know people who have bought cars and had great experiences, bought cars and didn't have great experiences. Doctors and lawyers, you can see their patients, what they've said about them. But when it comes to private investigators and disappearances or some of these nonprofit groups and everything, all they do is put out numbers. No, check our background. Here's what we did here. Here's what we did there. Instead, what do they market? They mention, they market their backgrounds. Well, I was in law enforcement. I was in the military. Well, none of that means anything. None of it means anything. I know it's impressive. I know it does impress families out there and everything, but statistically and functionally, it doesn't mean anything. The only thing that matters is if you actually solve cases and want to tell people how you do that so people can check if you're actually good at what you do or not. They don't do that. This is exactly why I put my percentages out there. And I've even listed in certain places what those cases, in fact, once in a while they come up here on this live show. I'll tell you about the predictions I got right and the predictions I got wrong. I don't mind doing that. To me, I think that gives me credibility by being honest about it. I don't see anybody else doing that and issuing their percentages. All they do is give you numbers. Whereas if I were to tell you, yeah, I've gotten let's say 20 predictions right on disappearances. Okay, well, how many did you actually predict? How many have you gotten wrong? Of the ones that have been solved, how many got, percentages matter more than sheer numbers. Yeah, you've worked on all these cases. Well, how many did you actually solve? Because what's weird to me, once again, and thank you, Sub Rosa, for getting me off on this tangent. LaFord, another good one since we know Ed feels about PIs. Yeah, Loverboy was my first concert. LaFord, yeah, Charlie says you'd be there. That would be a good time, Charlie. Because here's the thing. It's not just that these nonprofit organizations, and I'm not going to mention any names because I don't want to get in trouble. I'm not here to start arguments between me and other people out there. I'm just trying to give you an overall oversight of the way I see it after doing this for 10 years. You have a lot of nonprofit organizations in particular that's saying, we do this, we do that, we're asking for money and everything, and we've solved these many cases. Here's what you can't find. You can't find one Facebook page where a family said, yep, that group found my brother. Yep, that group found my child. Not one. Whereas we all know from Unfound Zone disappearances that when we get resolutions, whether it's a murder that's solved, like Zoe Campus's disappearance that was a murder, or Brandon Roberts, who ended up being alive in Oregon, or Devin Bond, who very sadly committed suicide, on and on and on. No matter what kind of resolution happens in a disappearance, we know how vocal families are. But for these nonprofit organizations who claim they're solving all these cases and everything, try finding any families that said, yep, they did it for me. Weird. And so I feel the same thing about private investigators is that, you've solved, and I'll continue to say it, some of the craziest conversations I've had about disappearances, different ones they were working on or ones they thought they knew. The craziest conversations I've had in doing this podcast for almost 10 years have been with private investigators. where I'm like, oh my goodness. That's a true story. So I get it. And I am here to help. And Subros, I want you to know, I am here to help law enforcement. And I have. I mean, I did testify in a trial. They asked me in Greeley, Colorado to show up. I showed up. Of course, they paid for my ticket and everything. And I appreciate that, even though they and I now differ on the guilt of Steve Pankey, kind of. So I have helped in law enforcement. And, you know, they wanted that interview of Steve. Take it. Use it. Fine by me. Some interviews that I've done over the years. Investigators for DA offices, you know, district attorney's offices, you know, a couple police departments have requested transcripts or recordings. If they could download it or whatever, have contacted me. Sure. Absolutely. Of course, with Adam Turner, with Mary Jane Van Gilder, myself, the podcast, among many other people, got thanked. You know, when Adam was able to go public with that, you know, a couple years ago. So I'm here to help. But we want to take that one step further. You know, if they have unsolved disappearances, they can contact me. I'm the easiest guy to find of any true crime host out here. Multiple locations. Sure. They want to send me the files. They want me to look over them for a small fee. I will do that. They will get the most structured analysis that they will get from anybody, anywhere. So I'm here to help. They can contact me anytime. The issue so far is that they're, you know, so far they're just looking for work that I've already done, interviews. If that's helpful to them, that's great. Happy. But none of them trust me or respect me enough for my work to actually, you know, say, hey, what do we need to do here? You know, that's another, it's another step. It might even be a couple more levels. And, you know, there you go. Subros, I just remember you saying Jennifer Cassie's family spent over 70 and try to find her and wonder what the money spent to, you got what that money went to. I'm going to be honest with you, Subrosa. I don't remember that dollar amount. If I said it, I'm more than happy to stand by it. I don't know where I got that number. The number and you typing it there doesn't really jump out to me, to be honest. I'm not saying I never said it. I don't remember saying a lot of things. But they surely, let's put it this way. They surely have spent a lot of money and time. Who knows how much money they spent going to court against the Orlando Police Department, which I would say I would never tell any guest ever to do that. I would never recommend that for any of my guests, even though many of them have been screwed over. But I think that families fall too much for the hype. They see somebody out there, once again, talking about their police background, their military background, or their FBI background or anything. And, you know, they see stars in their eyes. And the fact is, none of that means anything. You know, to see a private investigator, and, you know, as I've said many times, I think when we think private investigators, we start thinking of Thomas Magnum. We start thinking of the Rockford Files and everything else. You know, Mannix or whatever else. Dan Tanner from Vegas, wasn't he a private investigator? On and on and on. That's not the way it is in real life. In fact, too many, I think, private investigators get into that because they just get too caught up in the TV shows. That's not what it's like. So, I you know, don't think we need to go through all the Cassie stuff again. I think that her parents have made many mistakes. Many, many mistakes. I'm right here. I'm not reaching out to him because I know that they and I differ extremely. But if they were to contact me, I just wanted this on the record. If they were to contact me, I would talk to them, but I would be truthful with them. So there's that. So as far as that money, I don't know. I think where the money went, I don't know if it's that amount, but once it's gone to lawyers, it's gone to private investigators, it's gone here, it's gone there. A lot of wasted stuff. They're no further ahead than they were 20 years ago, and it sucks. I feel horrible for them. But this is work, so I have to be objective. Hello, Chad. What's going on? All right, let's get to what I want to discuss tonight. Of course, this past Friday, we took another look at Donna Michaelenko is the proper pronunciation of her name. And as I stated in the new commentary at the end, little did I know when I was interviewing Eric back there that we would still be working together now on a few things behind the scenes. And, he is a big part of this Atlantic Coast series that will be coming out within the next month. Let's just say within the next month. So, as far as what happened to Donna, I as I stated, you have to look at the time, you have to look at the era, as I stated in the new commentary at the end. Certainly if this were in 2026 and you heard about, she's out with one guy, and then you'd think, well, probably, something of a foul play nature happened due to, men and women in violence. I'm not sure it's as obvious going back to the 1960s, but probably it still probably is the number one choice, but not as much as it would be if her disappearance happened within the last 10 years, probably. But Donna Michaelenko, not Michelenko or anything else. It's Donna Michaelenko, and there you go. That's why we revisited it last Friday. We do have a new episode coming out this Friday. Of course, I will talk about that before we close shop tonight. Something that's it's going to be very interesting. I can't talk about it. I don't want to ruin it. Don't want to steal the thunder for when it happens during that Atlantic Coast series that will be coming out. Just want you to think about something. What would happen if the wrong DNA was used? Of course, you make so much about DNA and how it solves so many crimes. We don't talk a lot about it on Unfound. We rarely, or we talk forensics at all. However, we do know the DNA becomes, the number one relevancy when remains are found. What happens if they use the wrong DNA to test remains that are found? I think it's very possible that might have happened in a disappearance that will be featured during this Atlantic Coast series. We just get so caught up in, oh yeah, they used DNA and and oh no, it didn't match. Well, could it have been there was a mistake? How about that? Nina says, where do I watch the Ring camera? Does anyone know? You can find it right here on YouTube, Nina. I think all you'd have to do is type in disturbing Ring camera video to see. You will see the video I'm talking about will be a guy in broad daylight standing with like a long jacket. He has glasses. He has very thick eyebrows. That is the Ring video I'm talking about. But if you are a member of the discussion group on Facebook, it is posted there as well, Nina. So there's a couple different ways to find that. And yes, I will be talking about that very soon. So going back to the DNA, something that I'd never heard of before. What happens if the wrong DNA? Remains were dismissed years ago due to the DNA not matching up, but maybe the wrong DNA was used. It's very, very interesting, and you'll hear about it eventually. Moving on, I hope you got to watch part 2 of the John Lorden coverage where I appeared. And I thought everything went really well. I do apologize. I know there was a comment on John's channel about me that the person thought that the coverage was good, but my rocking back and forth was distracting. And I did comment. You can see it. I'm sorry. I apologized. And I think I said some of the effect. I just can't help it that I get very involved and very excited about this work, something to that effect. And I admit I'm excited. You don't know how many interviews, of course, you can't see them. All you do is hear them. You never know how many of these interviews that I do that when I'm doing them, I'm probably, going back and forth like this, kind of looking into the air, thinking about what the guest is saying, maybe rocking a little bit back and forth. I don't know. Nervous energy. I'm just excited to be doing the work. It's just like people sit there somewhere and their knees going up and down. I think it's just a little bit of that. I apologize if that was distracting to everybody, but it was for no other reason that I was excited to be there. I'm excited to talk to John. I'm excited for us to work together and bring this disappearance to everybody that I think a lot of people didn't know about. And to me, what I think was a lot of mistakes regarding that investigation. I think John thinks so as well. To come across something like that and, try to, in a way, straighten everything out, try to bring everything together and make sense of it and everything. That's what gets me excited about looking at these disappearances. And I guess it shows in me not being able to sit still talking to John. I apologize. I will tell you this now that we did the think tank last night, part 2 for, and I guess it's Haidar's disappearance, Abu Shakra's disappearance. We did part 2 last night. And also even comments, I think over in John's channel and elsewhere, more people than I would have thought think that he took off. That Jesus and Jimmy had nothing to do with it. Yes, they're shady people. Yes, they're bad guys and all of that. But more people, a higher percentage of people thought that he took off more than I could have ever guessed. Certainly it's a possibility. There's certainly no facts to dispute that. I of course, know the audience at least a little well enough to know that some people are going to think that, but way more than I would have predicted. So, but look at it, maybe, 6 kids now, quadruplets. And by the way, if you don't know, it wasn't just your regular quadruplets where all 4 kids, same gender, all looked alike. It was rarer than that. It was 2 sets of twins of different genders. So we had twin girls and twin boys, all 4 born at the same time. I don't even know what the odds. Somebody can look that up if they want to AI it, ChatGPT it or something to see how often does that happen? Wow. So maybe it's that. Of course, he's going to be going to, he has these charges against him. He's going to be doing some jail time. Of course, he's deep in debt. He owes money to the IRS. Certainly, those are all good reasons that a lot of people have tried to run off. Can't pay for the kids, charges, criminal charges, tax, delinquency, and everything else. People run off for all of those reasons. Well, he had all of them. So I acknowledge that. But maybe that's a poll I didn't do a poll for Abu Shakra Haidar. So maybe I need to do that just to check in and see what everybody, just to get a percentage on that. But like I said, more than I thought. I'm wondering, what all of you thought. So that's on my mind. Also moving on, it's time for Heather Grotman from the Lost and Found blogs, lostandfoundblogs.com, to be making another appearance. In fact, I'm going to be interviewing her tomorrow night. And the thing about Heather, she always brings us unique disappearances, mainly because that's kind of what she's looking for in her work. Of course, I take all comers. Heather, she's looking for particular types of cases. Fine by me. It's her work. She can do what she wants. So she's going to be bringing another unique one to all of us, and I really appreciate it. She'd told me about this months ago. Well, I'm going to appear again. This is the one I want to do. Okay, Heather. So we're going to do that discussion, that interview tomorrow night. And I have to say, of course, she brought us just to prove my point, Dale Kerstetter. Remember, I think that's the first. Was that the first appearance she had? Maybe not. But Heather brought us Dale Kerstetter, certainly unique. And then, of course, last year she brought us Kenneth Placed, a guy who certainly took off out of his life after he was, he's eventually thought he was going to get caught stealing money and everything. So, with this one, it was the disappearance of a guy who probably was living under a fake identity. So you can be looking forward to that. Not sure when that episode's going to come out, but we're going to crank that interview out tomorrow night. Also, of course, being that it's getting toward the end of April, another update episode to do. It's going to be update episode number 23. Not this Friday, next Friday. So it's technically going to come out in May. I'll get the next update episode done. Update episode number 23, and I can remember when I did the first one. It's so crazy. If you're not aware, I do these episodes every 4 months. So, and I've been doing that for a few years, maybe 4 or 5 years on that schedule. So 3 times a year, I do update episodes. I look back at what has transpired as best I can over the previous 4 months and give updates on the disappearances that Unfound has covered. I also do updates on the Unfound nows, and included in those updates, if I know about them, I include if the guest, if we've had any guests who have passed away. So, like I said, not this Friday, but a week and a half from now. That's coming. And also, as a special surprise episode, I will spring on you. I've not recorded it yet. You can be looking for, of course, once a year, usually in April, I do a Q&A episode. So I put together questions that I've gotten asked through email or through the live show, a variety of ways. I get asked a variety of questions, and I respond to these people. In the Q&A episode, I accumulate all those questions, and then I, of course, don't say who asked me them, but I answer those questions publicly. So be looking for that as a surprise. Probably will not come out on a Friday. It will just appear in your podcast feed someday, and I will try to make it as interesting as possible. It doesn't all have to necessarily do with disappearances or true crime. A lot of times, most of the time, those are most of the questions. But I've been asked, well, why are you still single? And of course, the answer to that is always, well, how much time do you have? So I get all sorts of questions about music and things. So going to try to put that together, hopefully within the next month. I will not announce when it's going to be released. It will just randomly appear in your feed. Compliments of myself. So those are all the things, surely, that I want to cover. So let's get to the things that I want to cover. Of course, these 3 main topics. And being that Nina asked me about where do I watch the Ring camera, does anyone know? I hope you found that, Nina. I'm going to talk about that first. All right. So there is a YouTube channel that I visit just about every day. And it's called Active Self-Protection. It's hosted by a guy's name is John Correa, Correa. He lives in Arizona. And he and a bunch of other people, they specialize in self-defense tactics. So it's not just all about guns, but it's also about pepper spray. It's about hands-on tactics, fighting and everything. And they hold classes and everything, but they run this YouTube channel. I think they really do a good job. And one of the things he does every day is he goes across the internet and finds videos of all over the world, from Brazil, South Africa, Canada, wherever, of people defending themselves, shootings and things like that. And he tries to use these videos as ways to teach people, hey, this is what you need to watch out for. Look what's going on here, what happened here. And last week, the video that he analyzed is one that had already kind of gone viral. And I forget where it's from, but it's in the United States. And the video shows this guy. I don't know if I want to necessarily call him weird looking, but I don't know what else to call it. I'm sure that I wouldn't necessarily think if he was weird looking if I didn't know what happened. But he's a kind of short, dark hair, looks like a younger guy, maybe early 30s, somewhere in there. He has glasses on. I'm going to say he's at least a little bit overweight. And he has these really dark, bushy, thick eyebrows, the opposite of mine. And he's wearing this long trench coat. And he walks up to this house in broad daylight, which looks to be in a very middle-class neighborhood. And he starts knocking on the door. Well, nobody's home. But because there's motion, there's a Ring camera there to set it off. Well, the homeowner is at work somewhere. And, there's like audio, and the homeowner's talking to this guy. Who are you? What do you want? And the guy starts talking. The guy who's standing there at the front door starts babbling on about, I want to see this girl who's inside. Let me in right now. I hear her in there. Let me in. D, oh, that guy. Yeah, D. Now you know what I'm talking about. Let me in. And the homeowner, who once again is not there, is trying to be real calm about it. Sir, I don't know who you are. And this guy says, well, I'm from your neighborhood. And well, I'm in the neighborhood too. I don't know who you are. Why are you there? What are you doing? Well, the guy starts kicking at the door, trying to rip it up, open. He starts yelling. He goes, if you don't open this door right now, I will end you. It's obvious that this guy is having some sort of mental health issue. He's by himself. He's not flashing a knife or a gun or anything, but something is mentally going on with him. And Sub Rosa says it was terrifying. Yeah. So Sub Rosa, you've seen it too. And yeah, I urge everybody once again, if you can see it, find it on YouTube. Like I said, if you do terrifying Ring video or something like that, it's surely going to pop up, or you can just go to Unfound's discussion group. But he starts, clawing at the Ring camera. He's yelling at it once inside and everything. Well, about that time, the homeowner, I don't know why the homeowner didn't call 911, or maybe he did on his way home or something. But the homeowner says, decides, I guess he didn't work too far away, wherever he was. He gets in his vehicle. Well, in the meantime, this guy he goes like to the back of the house and breaks into the house. And there are cameras inside this house as well. So you can see him walking around there, yelling, shouting, looking for somebody. And yeah, we're in the house. They hid in the garage. All right. Thank you, Mary. But so this homeowner, is rushing home once again. I think somewhere with all of this, he ended up calling 911 because the police did eventually show up. So the guy breaks in. He's going through the house. Once again, doesn't seem to have a weapon on him or anything, but what's going on? But for sure, the family does not know this guy. And the homeowner gets home and tries to take this guy on with a shovel. And they get into a tussle, and each of them kind of harm each other. But what calms this guy down was the homeowner, this guy saying to him, "Were you in the military?" And you can't see it on it. You hear it, but you can't see it. You can automatically tell that comment calmed this guy right down for some reason. And because he goes, "Yeah, I was." And the homeowner says, "Okay, man, how about we just go outside and talk about this? Let's just, there's a bit something along those lines." And miraculously, the guy kind of chilled out a little bit. The homeowner goes outside with this guy, and right about the time that the police show up and they take him into custody. And then, of course, the police come in, they make sure there's nobody else in there and everything. Well, it turns out that the guy was having a mental health issue, didn't know anybody there, but also he's a pedophile. And so once they figured out who he really was and everything, he had something pending against him. And I'm, of course, that's a concern. And if he's guilty of all those charges, I want him to go away for as long as it takes. But my point about this, why, of course, this caught my attention, and maybe if some of you saw it, you thought of it too. Of course, I went right to the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. Why? Because some guy showed up at her front door. There's a Ring camera. Of course, that guy also, took it down, ripped it off or whatever, and somehow got in the house and took Nancy away. And what I want, the correlation between these two, the connection that I want you to see between these two incidences. And even though I realize one was at day, one's at night, one guy had a mask on, one guy didn't have a mask on, one guy shouting, acting crazy. I don't think that the guy that took Nancy Guthrie said anything at all, at least not to the camera. I think probably said something to her, but nothing that we know that was recorded. I realize there are differences. But the big mistake too many people make is they try to think about these things logically. When they look at Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, they look at it logically and realize that's at least one way to look at it. Well, it had something to do with her daughter. That's a logical thought. She's famous. Well, it had something to do with money. That's a logical thought. If there's a ransom note, if you want to believe that. It had something to do with something within the neighborhood. That's a logical thought. Those things happen too. Neighbors get into disagreements and, all of a sudden, bullets are flying and everything else. All of these things happen. But we also have to remember that there are enough videos and crimes and everything that have been committed, not just in the United States, but all over the world, that defy any kind of logic. There is no logic except in that crazy guy's own mind, which really isn't logic at all. That's just the thoughts of somebody who is crazed. There's no logic to figure why that guy was there. For example, let's just say if the facts are just a little different regarding the video I'm discussing, that say it's at night, say there is no video outside the house or inside the house, and the male homeowner is away and his wife and child and daughter are at home, and he comes home from work and the house is broken into. His wife and daughter are gone. There's, not necessarily signs of violence, except it's a break-in. There's no blood or anything. What would we be thinking? Of course, a lot of people are going to go to the logical choices that had something to do with a relationship. Maybe the husband actually did it. Would go to all these things. But what we would find out, maybe, of course, if that guy got caught, it didn't have anything to do with anything logical at all. Nothing. If that guy in that video would have pulled that off, like I said, under different circumstances at night with no video and everything else, nobody would be thinking it must be a guy who's going through some mental health issue that did this. Nobody's going to jump to that. Nobody's going to pick that. But that's what would have been the ultimate outcome. I'm going to keep pounding this and pounding this and pounding this. And when it comes to disappearances, is that it's best to put your logic aside and better to look at it as far as likelihoods. And you base the likeliness on what you know about all other crimes and disappearances and everything out there. Because if you use logic, what you're saying is everybody acts logical. Not true. We ourselves on our daily lives, we do a lot of things that make no sense. Anybody watching us would not understand, but it makes sense to us. But it's logic to us, but not logical to anybody else. And that's really the only thing that matters when it comes to trying to analyze disappearances. This is one of the reasons, so many times she wouldn't have left her kids. He wouldn't have left her kids. Well, maybe, but a lot of people do leave their kids. All the time. It happened today. There were parents who left their kids. It seems illogical to you because you love your children. You want to see them grow up. You love being around them. They love you. They respect you. You love them. You respect them. You want to hang out with them and everything else. Well, a lot of people don't have that. So I want you to watch that video of this crazy guy and think about Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. And I want you to be open to the idea that the abduction of Nancy Guthrie does not need to make sense. It just is. Now, what are the, I'll go back to, well, what do you think happened to her, Ed? And that's why I continue to say, I think that the solution to Nancy Guthrie's disappearance is on the edge of what we would call the bell curve. Bell curve looks like a bell. And this is in the middle is what, the odds, the really, really likelihood stuff in the thick area of the bell. I happen to believe whatever was going on, the reason for this is out on the edges. Something that is rare, yes, possibly going into very illogical territory. Why do I think that? Because if it were something logical, because most of the time people do act logically, going to work and doing all these things. If this were a thing, women, older women living by themselves would be getting abducted from their houses all the time. That's not happening. D, D, who goes by Taylor here in the chat. Of course, I've been appearing on her YouTube channel on Thursday nights where we have been exploring this. D has been doing a fantastic job of finding disappearances or abductions of, I'll just say older women, let's just say of AARP age and older. and looking at them and seeing, well, what was going on here? And I'll tell you, D has found a few, not a lot. And we found one in particular that we discussed last Thursday regarding the woman's last name was Hearin, Hearin. And it seems that with her disappearance, it really didn't have much to do with her at all. It had something to do with her husband. And there was a real ransom left behind, on and on and on. But I think I've, been accurate in saying this kind of disappearance where older people of AARP, whether men or women, getting abducted from their homes is rare. So that's why I continue to say we have to look at a rare reason, some sort of really isolated motive. And when you start talking about that, I think it goes into the realm of we have to think of this crime illogically. And that's why I've stated, could this just be something along the lines of some guy just thought that Nancy Guthrie was Satan and she needed to be taken away? Some tinfoil hat type of situation. Or if it is something logical, once again, it's on the fringe, meaning somebody who had a long-running grudge because Nancy Guthrie didn't give this guy a good enough tip. Some waiter, some Uber driver, something like that. That normally does not usually lead to somebody going missing. It leads to people being ticked off. Waiters and drivers being ticked off, and it may lead to the next time that person comes in, somebody spitting their food, on and on and on. But it usually doesn't end in violence or abductions. This is where I continue to be. And this is why I think that video is a good example of what I'm trying to tell all of you. Just because somebody is out banging on your front door and yelling at your Ring camera and everything doesn't mean that there's a universal logic behind it. So check that video out. If you do, let me know. You can email me unfoundpodcast@gmail.com or go watch it in the discussion group and make a comment there. I'll be interested to hear your insight into it as well. And D says, thank you, Ed. You're very welcome, D. You've been doing some nice work on that, accumulating that list for me. And it I guess D, it very well maybe lead to maybe some of those people's family members appearing on Unfound. Maybe we can make that happen. Rockford makes his first appearance tonight. Look at you. At 10:08 p.m. Eastern time. People also try to make every criminal into a mastermind or a Bundy or Keys. Often it's someone having a really bad day, mentally, substance-wise, that sort of thing. Right. Right. I mean, as far as I know, regarding Nancy Guthrie, do we have a lot of masked men breaking into houses around there? That would be news to me. If that's true, news to me. Yeah. And I'm going to forgive you, Rockford, that, you put Israel Keys and mastermind in the same sentence. So that's that Ring video. Even as a guy, a 55-year-old, and I think I can take care of myself pretty well. If I don't have a Ring camera on my plate, I don't really need it. But I can assure you that if I were out somewhere at a coffee shop, and if I had a Ring camera and it went off and somebody was outside my door right over there acting like that, that would creep me out too. And I'd be like, man, I'm glad I'm not back at my condo right now. Moving on, something else that I want to discuss before we get to the UFO stuff and Ronald Tammen. I caught that one too. I caught that too, Ed. Yes. Nina, Ed, don't forget it's what? I'm not, Nina, I am not understanding what you're writing there. It's Noma, Nina, Mills, Nona, Nina, don't forget. All right. Sorry, I'm not. And you got some emojis in there, Nina. Sorry. I'm sure it's my fault that I'm confused by that. I do want to talk about this real quickly. There's been an update. Remember this from what, 15 years ago, this real estate agent that got murdered. And just recently they charged somebody from the company, at least she worked at the company at the time, who built the home where this woman was shot. I just want to read this to you. And in reading it, I'm even more confused about what went on at the time and why it took all this time to charge anybody. I kind of edited this. In a previous court filing obtained by KCCI, at the time this murder happened, that a witness who lived next door to the townhouse told authorities she heard two loud noises and later saw Ramsey, the shooter, allegedly, outside the front door on the day of the alleged shooting. The witness also reportedly told authorities upon looking out her second-story window, she saw Ramsey pacing outside her vehicle and using her phone. The court filing indicates Ramsey called a colleague at Rutland Homes immediately following the alleged shooting, but did not call 911. As the witness observed Ramsey outside the townhouse, she reportedly told authorities she watched as Ramsey got into her vehicle and proceeded to back up at a high rate of speed in an erratic manner and leave the area. It was the witness, not Ramsey, who ultimately called 911 to report the shooting, authorities said. Prosecutors also revealed Ramsey allegedly provided inconsistent accounts of her whereabouts on the day of Auckland's death across multiple interviews conducted during the original investigation in 2011. Court records further indicate that when authorities executed a search warrant at Ramsey's home, once again, the shooter's home, way back in 2011, they found several firearms, illegal drugs, and posters depicting violence. So I have the same question that I did when this, when I talked about this a couple weeks ago, and I realized maybe this is the third time discussing this. I think the first time is when this woman was actually taken into custody and everything. How was this not solved back in 2011? If they really had a witness who put this Ramsey woman at the scene at the time that the shootings occur, even though I realize this witness did not see the shooting occur, but it sounds like the witness heard something. And they know that this Ramsey woman was there. Her car was seen there. She's seen walking around there. She's seen backing up out of there. They know that she was there. They know that she didn't call 911. In addition, they go to her house. I guess they suspected something. They found several firearms. I guess maybe not the gun that killed that young woman and everything else. What's the deal? Why was she not arrested back then? No, bad alibi. Seemingly somebody saw her at the scene. She doesn't call 911. On and on and on. And still she gets to walk around a free woman for 15 years. So I'm guessing maybe if you've been following this or you've read accounts and maybe there's people been doing YouTube videos on it. I really don't know. Maybe you're thinking like what I'm thinking, that why was this unsolved? It doesn't seem like anything else and nobody else could have done it. Now I realize maybe they necessarily didn't have scientific evidence, but if you have even me who is dubious of eyewitnesses, if this witness was able to pick Ramsey out of a lineup and could identify her car, and we know that she was there and didn't call 911, I mean, how much do you need? So this is all a bit confusing to me. The stories about this murder from 2011 only make it all that more puzzling. Maybe somebody else has an answer out there. I also wanted to check, in knowing that I was going to be talking about this, that is still unclear if this Ramsey woman did it, and I'm inclined to think that she did, what the motive was. I did a couple different kinds of Google searches on that, with the names and what was the motive, what does everybody think the motive is and everything. And it's still not very clear. It goes everywhere from this woman was the shooter was ticked off that, was it some sort of, three-way relationship. She, was this, the woman who was the victim, was she with this Ramsey's husband or something like that? That's just a theory. I don't know if there's any facts to support that. But it goes everything from that, something romantically involved, passion and everything, to the whole other side that this was something business related. That Auckland, this woman, his last name was Auckland, she screwed this woman, Ramsey, over somewhere, somewhere between the home building company and the realtor company. So even at this point, at least publicly, we have no idea what the motive still, we have no idea what it is. Whereas what I would say is, back in 2011, this was something that I think, for the most part, could be predicted to have been planned. That somebody knew that this young woman was going to be at that house at that location. I mean, how many people could have wanted her dead? This is like the Dan Markel thing overall, all over again. I think on top of everything else, one of the reasons the killers got caught is because there was really only one group of people who wanted him dead. And guess what? They were the ones who did it. So how many people back then could have wanted her dead? And could that not have been easy to really, 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 really narrow it down? It's not like this young woman who's the victim was a mob boss. Or to go the other way, like this woman was a pedophile and was walking around the streets, even though she had molested many kids, and then she gets murdered. Well, good luck finding out who did it. It certainly wasn't something like that. So I don't understand this. Witnesses, warrant served at the Ramsey's home. No 911 call, even though she was at the scene. I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Was it something that slipped through the fingers? It seems unlikely. If anybody has any answers out there, I'm all eyes and ears. If somebody knows more about this or can explain this in a way that I was like, I can be like, oh, yeah, okay. All right. But so far, nobody's done that. Hello, Maureen. Good to see you tonight. All right. I got two more things to do on the titles. The UFO stuff and Ronald Tammen. Subros, I'm getting educated by it. I often jumped to the conclusion that missing people were often abducted or was foul play. I didn't think it was logical that so many people just walked out of their lives. I think what I would say, Subrosa, is we just have to understand that it's logical to them. And that is hard. It's very difficult to get inside people's heads. We are very, very good at hiding stuff, both good stuff and bad stuff. And, one of the things that we as humans greatly, 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 greatly overestimate about ourselves is we think that we can tell when people are lying. Can't do it. Can't do it. Not saying we can't get lucky and make predictions and things, but reliably, scientifically, can't do it. And the way we try to understand the world is, well, what would I do in that situation? And a lot of times that works. But when you're talking about disappearances, and you are a person who's never had any mental health issues, and you are a person who's never had any drug issues, and never have had PTSD, and have never had anybody cheat on you, and never had any other relationship problems, on and on and on and on and on, it's going to be hard for you to think logically about, to think about somebody who has had those issues. We're much better looking at disappearances that are known to be abductions, maybe like Nancy Guthrie, or some of Unfound Zone's ones, like Jody Huisentruit, like Linda K. Carroll, who was dragged out of her house. We got violence, we got doors kicked in, we got things strewn across the parking lot. Our minds work way better with that stuff. Whereas when it comes to person here this second, person not there the next second, and there's no signs of anything, our brains do not do very well with that. And that's why I think that it's much better to rely on history. And being that we have all this information at our fingertips, in our phones, laptops, tablets, we can go right in and find disappearances, Google them, Charlie Project, name us, whatever, and look up disappearances that are similar. And we can even look up disappearances that are like the one we're looking at that have been solved. And start thinking, well, could that have happened? I will continue to insist that is the way to do it. That is how you get to the point that you can predict resolutions accurately about 90% of the time. That's how I've done it. That's how you've done it. The tough part is learning enough about enough disappearances to be able to do that. That's the tough part. And even so, I still get some wrong. Not a perfect system, but it's better than anything else I think that's been tried yet. But so thank you, Sabrosa. And I do think, I think you're right. I think that if you would have told me 10 years ago when I started doing this, that there would be this amount of people who probably walked off, I'd have been surprised too. I'm not surprised anymore. The tough part is, at least in talking to some guests and everything and trying to explain that to them, they reject it. That's also the tough part. Because once again, they're thinking logically that person wouldn't do that to me. Well, just may be on the wrong day. So I thank you, Sabrosa, for saying that. Thank you. All right, this UFO stuff. Speaking of logic and craziness and illogical and everything else. Of course, we have this Atlantic Coast series coming out. I'm not guaranteeing anything yet. But once this Atlantic Coast series is done, it's going to be 5, 6, 7 episodes. Very much like how they did Serial, very much how Payne Lindsay has done things, like with Tara Grinstead. Of course, there's been some podcasts that have only focused on one disappearance, and 7, 8, 9 episodes. I'm going to be kind of doing this for this project that myself and Eric have been working on. I'm contemplating the next series being all of this stuff that has been made about all of these people who have disappeared or been murdered, who are connected to the military community and seemingly had things to do with UFO research and stuff like that. Area 51, Black Project, trucks and things. And if it's been a big thing, in fact, I think there was even something up on Capitol Hill. They're questioning people. And, but I would, of course, get into doing this, of course, to debunk all of it. You know, when it comes to stuff like that, of course, maybe some of you knew the Amazing Randy. Of course, he's dead now, but he was a guy who would go out and, you know, if somebody said, yes, I can, you know, bend forks with my mind and I'm a psychic and I can predict things and everything, the Amazing Randy would show up and debunk these people and show the public how these people were doing that. He would say, you know, these people are lying to. Amazing Randy was a magician. He had nothing against that. But when it gets to the point for him, when people started telling, you know, the audience, you know, the public that we have special powers and everything, that was a bridge too far for the Amazing Randy. This is so I might have to do my own Amazing Randy impression, maybe with Eric's help, and maybe I can get some of the other assistants involved. Who knows? Just to show how much all of this is crap. The sensationalism. And because just in looking at it, the list of names, of course, like I said, I already did Unfound now on the Riesel woman who went missing during a hike. We know about this McCaslin guy who seemingly walked away from his house. He was in the Air Force. And so there's these other people have gone missing, and there have been a couple people who have been murdered, professors, physics professors, or whoever. And people within the 3 a.m. Reddit community are all trying to, you know, draw some conclusion, even like I said, to the point that this has become stuff on, you know, in the United States Congress, as if they don't have anything else to do. What would I say about this? Well, look at all, you know, what we're, you know, if somebody to really ask me, well, look at it, Ed. These people were involved with military projects, and they were involved here and they were involved there. How do you explain it? I got a one way to explain it. You know what? We have a huge federal government with a lot of employees and a lot of people working on stuff like that. What else can I tell you? The federal government's budget is not $5 trillion, $6 trillion for no reason. The federal government in the United States is as big and as expensive as it has ever been. So that's the way I look at these things. It's no different if we were to start tracking the deaths of Amazon workers. You know, given that Walmart and Amazon are two of the biggest private employers in the United States. If we were to start tracking how their employees died, how many of them disappeared, we might find kind of the same thing. Why? Because they have so many people working for them. And, you know, we were to find out that, you know, 10 Amazon drivers, I don't know what the numbers are. I'm just picking out a number. But if you were to find out on any, you know, every day that some Amazon driver died in a crash, would that be a conspiracy to you? You know, driver dies a car wreck in Pennsylvania. Next day, one dies in Hawaii. Next day, you know, one dies in California. The day after that, someone died, you know, a driver dies in Florida. Would you all think it was a conspiracy? Or would you just think, you know what? The roads in the United States are dangerous. This is something statistically that I've found that the average person has a hard time understanding. Now, the advantage I have is that, as I've told all of you, I didn't really apply myself in college. I didn't want to be there, to be honest. But the class that I did the best in was anything having to do with statistics. I don't know why. I don't know why. And what we have to remember is there was an example that I always use from my days in Las Vegas. A lot was made about this remote town, Fallon, Nevada, I think it was, where a bunch of kids of a certain age got all diagnosed with some sort of disease, way above what we would call the national average. So many, one out of 10,000 kids gets this disease. Where in Fallon, it seems like 1 out of 10. And, all the health experts went into this town. This is while I lived in Las Vegas, in Nevada. And, they went in, they started testing the air, they started testing the water, they started testing the materials the houses were made of, on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And they tested everything that you can test in 21st century terms. They could find no cause for why these kids had this happen to them. Zero. Keep in mind, this was still just a minority of children, but it was way above the national average. So once again, nobody wants to see any children suffer from anything. You watch all those St. Jude's commercials. They're horrible. They're very, very sad. But it really strikes the heartstrings, and everybody wants to do something, how these kids are suffering and everything. We got to find out what's going on. And they went in and they found nothing. No cause of it at all. And so, of course, then because people don't accept that it could just be statistics, just odds or something, of course, what do they start thinking about? Conspiracies and, the government, testing people and everything else. No proof of any of it. What generally the public doesn't understand is that most likely somewhere else in the United States, you could find a town, a city where, like I said, let's say at the 1 in 10,000 children get this particular disease. You could go somewhere else in the United States, to Florida, to Maine, wherever else, and find out that only 1 in 100,000 children have gotten that disease. So the national average is 1 in 10,000. In Fallon, Nevada, it's 1 in 10, but in Maine, it's 1 in 100,000. What people don't understand statistically is that the 1 in 10 example is exactly the same as the 1 in 100,000 example. They're just on opposite ends of the odds chart. The problem is nobody cares about the 1 in 100,000. That doesn't get anybody's attention. When kids don't get diseases, nobody cares. That's how we work. We're working from a point of emotion, not black and white statistics and things like that. Nobody looks at the 1 in 100,000, example and says, man, there must be something wrong there. No, everybody's like, oh, that's fantastic. Even though it's an oddity as well. Nobody's going there checking the water saying, why aren't these children getting diseases like they are in Fallon? Nobody does that. They just say, man, that's great. But statistically, they're the same. It is a very, very hard, especially once again, because it's very sad. And, and the way I remember it, this disease that these kids were getting, pretty serious. But nobody sits back, and it's not, the person that comes in and decides, what, this is just statistics, gets no sympathy. They're considered to be cold-hearted, uncaring. They're sometimes seen to be as part of the conspiracy. Oh, how could you ever say that? You must know what's really going on here, and you're just trying to get people to not do anything. That's the way things work, though. When they try to find cancer clusters and things like that, A lot of it just comes down to statistics. It's no different than sports, or some guy, one player goes 10 for 10, another player goes 0 for 10. Statistics. Some player starts out like Marcell Ozuna for the Pirates. He started out, batting like batting 50, 0.050. And everybody's like, wow, that stinks. But now he's, on the other end, and he's like batting above what they expected him. Both are the same. Statistically, they are the same. They are both outliers. Of course, Malcolm Gladwell, I think, wrote a book about that, Outliers. Marian, is that the movie Juilliard said no? No, you're thinking of Aaron Brockovich. No, the movie came out before this was actually discovered in Nevada Marine, I think. No, this was something different. But it just shows, Maureen, you're bringing it up. I forget what exactly it was, but you're kind of proving my point. These things are happening a lot. But there's also a lot of places where kids aren't getting any diseases. Statistically, it's all the same, even though nobody wants to hear that. Rockford, to bring into Unfound World, it's a bit like the San Francisco 5. All cases are a bit unusual or unsolved, superficial similarities among the missing, yet all unrelated. Right. And that's exactly why I wanted to do a few of them, Rockford. Because I knew, even in back then, 300 disappearances ago, that most likely they're not connected. You start looking at the young men and what's going on in their lives and everything, other than them being kind of the same age and it happening within a few years. Other than that, there's no similarities. They were in, San Francisco, different reasons, had different things going on. Of course, mental health issues, drug issues, depression issues, on and on and on, No serial killer. It only looks like a serial killer. And the problem is too many people want it to be a serial killer, so they have something to talk about. So when it comes to this UFO stuff, same thing. Getting back to this, same thing. People just want something to talk about. Especially people who believe in UFOs and believe it gives them all they could ever want to do this. And something else I discovered, and this makes it even worse, the murderers that are connected to this, they have the killers in custody. This was like the professor, when those professors got murdered like last year. This was all part of that. The shooters have been caught. And still people are trying to say they're all connected somehow. And they're talking about it on Capitol Hill. It's disgusting. So I'm considering that for the next series, kind of analyze all these disappearances. And but as I also said when I talked about the woman, her last, I'm forgetting her first name right now, Reza, R-E-Z-A, and Neil McCaslin, if these people really did walk off, maybe they did so. Maybe these people are so stressed out. Maybe they're feeling suicidal and depressed and everything else because so many idiots on the internet think these people are hiding something. Maybe these people have been driven to leave their lives. They've been driven to depression. They've been driven to PTSD. They've been driven to craziness because all of you people out there think they're withholding something when they're not. Have you ever considered that? Have you, all of you people who think there's a conspiracy here, have you ever considered that you are the problem? That if these people are walking off and committing suicide and having problems in their lives, you are to blame. Because really what you are, you're nothing but cyber bullies. Have you ever even considered that? Probably not. Why? Because you have an agenda. You're just cyber bullies. That's all you are. when I look at this, it certainly could be that the woman who went hiking had an accident or something. But you know, the one woman who died or whatever, they think she was talking crazy, anti-gravity technology, and there's a video of her out here. The woman had lost her mind. Can't anybody understand that? What do they call that? Whistling past the graveyard, right? When you don't want to take care of the real problem or whatever that means. This is like the smiley face killer hoax all over again. Don't want to talk about the real problem, which is, you know, college age drinking, people drinking to excess and to the point they can't walk and can't swim and everything else. No, we just want to think killers out there. So what continues? Young people continue to overdrink and not handle their alcohol. And more people die. So for this, no, it can't be that these people were in stressful jobs. And it's made even more stressful by all of you. No, it has to be that, you know, that they secretly know that aliens are tracking our every move and the aliens are going to be here every day and they want to, you know, kill themselves or whatever else before the aliens get here or something. Anybody wants to bet me their net worth about aliens, they know where to reach me. Nina, D, what is your YouTube channel? Yeah, D, did you see that? Somebody's asking you about your YouTube channel. You might want to answer that. So I'm thinking about that, you know, really getting into these disappearances and show how they're not connected. And of course, even as Rockford brings up the San Francisco Five, there are still Sean Seedy and Christian Hughes are still the two disappearances that I've not featured, but I know about them. In fact, I've talked to Christian Hughes' mother a few years ago. I know about those disappearances pretty well anyway. And yeah, none of these are connected. None of them are connected. All right, let's get to Ronald Tammen. I'll do this as I usually do. Now, you should know that there is a website devoted entirely. A woman, her name is Jennifer Wenger, Wenger. She has put several years into trying to find out what happened to Ronald Tammen. So it's ronaldtamman.com if you want to go check that out. I'm not necessarily saying I agree with her theories or anything, but I'm more than happy to let you know about it. You can go judge it for yourself. ronaldtammen.com. It's ronaldtammen.com. I think the name of the site is A Good Man is Hard to Find, which is interesting. So I'm going to read the Charlie Project rundown, a lot of it, not all of it. And then I'm going to do this as I usually do. I'm going to questions that are still in my mind, and then I will analyze it and make my own prediction as to what happened. Just keep in mind, this disappearance happened way back in 1953. So the odds of it being solved, don't know how likely they are, but of course, Mary Jane Van Gilder's disappearance was solved, so maybe it's not totally crazy. Ronald Tamman was last seen in Old Fisher Hall, a former Victorian mental asylum converted to a dormitory at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, on April 19th of 1953. Coincidentally, that's where Ben Roethlisberger, quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers, went to school. He was a resident hall advisor at Fisher Hall and lived in room 225. At 8 p.m., he requested new bed sheets because someone had put a dead fish in his bed. The 1950s, they were crazy. Sometime around 8:30 p.m., Tamman apparently heard something outside his room. This is conjecture, by the way. I don't think this is necessarily factual. That disturbed him. He went out into the hallway to investigate. He never returned. This would imply that somebody saw him do this. I don't think anybody saw him do this. His roommate came back to the dorm at 10 p.m., so approximately an hour and a half later, and found Ronald gone. The roommate originally assumed Ronald was spending the night at the Delta Tau Delta fraternity house where he was a member. So the roommate did not report the disappearance until the next day. There is no indication that Tamman left of his own accord. His clothes, car keys, wallet, identification, watch, high school class ring, and other personal items were left behind in his dorm room. And he also left the lights on, the radio playing, and a psychology textbook lying open on his desk. Weirdly or curiously, he had actually dropped his psychology course 3 weeks later, so there was no reason for him to have that textbook out. So think about that. His gold 1938 Chevy sedan, like I said, this is going back, was not taken from its space in the school parking lot. He left his bass fiddle in the back seat of the car, and he left about $200 in his bank account, which is quite a bit in 1953 terms. That's like, I don't know, $4,000 today. He is believed to have had no more than $10 to $15 on his purse in the night he disappeared and was not wearing a coat. Now, you should know, once again, April 19th, this just happened yesterday. That would be 73 years ago. However, authorities have not found any indication of foul play in Tamman's disappearance either. They do not believe he could have been forcibly abducted, as he was large enough and strong enough to defend himself against the most attackers. They theorized that he could have developed amnesia and wandered away, but if that was the case, he should have been found relatively quickly. A woman living outside of Oxford, 12 miles east of the Miami campus, claims that a young man came to her door at 11 p.m. that evening. Tamman disappeared and asked what town he was in. Then he asked directions to the bus stop, which she gave him, and he left. You know how I feel about those things. 5 months to the day before Tamman vanished, this is true, he went to the Butler County Coroner's office in Hamilton, Ohio. I think we covered a disappearance in Hamilton. And asked for a test to have his blood typed. So he wasn't asking for any diseases. He just wanted to know what blood type he had. The coroner claims that this was the only such request he had ever gotten in 35 years of practice. And keep in mind, he went to the coroner's office, not to a regular doctor. It is unknown why Tamman wanted the test done and why he did not have it conducted in Oxford, where local physicians or the university hospital could have typed his blood for him. He was scheduled for a physical examination by the Selective Service for induction into the Army, but inductees did not need to know their blood type in advance of their physical. However, they do figure that out. Of course, you're going to go into battle. They got to know what blood type you are. In the decades after Tamman's disappearance, students at Miami University claimed his ghost haunted Fisher Hall. His parents are now deceased. Fisher Hall was torn down in 1978, and an extensive search was conducted in the rubble for Tamman's remains, but no evidence was found of that. Some additional information. Being that he had been selected for selective service, otherwise known as the draft, he did have his fingerprints on file, but those fingerprints, as this woman who did this research, Jennifer Wenger, discovered that the FBI had destroyed those fingerprint records in 2002. And she has found that interesting because the FBI, I guess the rule is, I've never heard of this before, is that the FBI will destroy fingerprints that they have 7 years after a person's death. So did the FBI actually know where Ronald Tamman was this whole time and thought that he died and knew that he died in 1995? Something to think about. There have been podcasts, a variety of podcasts who have covered this disappearance. And in fact, one of them did an interview with the son of Ronald's roommate at the time. I also want to add in that there may be some sort of discrepancy in the timeline. Did he really leave at 8:30? There seems to be information out there that it's very possible that he did not actually disappear until later, like after 10 o'clock. So keep that in mind for my analysis as well. There was a rumor that he wasn't doing very well. and that he had been marked for the draft, of course, called the Selective Service. And being that he was in school, of course, you get a deferment. Hello, Shali, how are you? Good to see you. Getting in late, that's fine. And of course, if he wasn't doing one school, remember, he had dropped the psychology class. He could have lost his deferment, which means he would have had to have gone into the Army. Now, anybody who really, really knows their disappearances might recognize that one of the first of these kinds that I did on this live show, going back to like last summer, was the disappearance of Michael Negretti in LA. Remember, he was also in a dorm in the city of Los Angeles. Was he going to UCLA, I think? And somehow he also disappeared from his dorm, never to be seen again. And of course, the disappearance that we featured on Unfound very early in this podcast's existence, Joshua Guimond, disappeared from St. John's University in Minnesota in the early 2000s, of course, from a college campus. So just keep this in mind as we do this. So he's there, and then he's not. His car is still there. There was also a rumor that he might have been seen talking to a woman in a car that night, sitting in a car with some woman. So, you know, there are stories out there like this. I don't know what to make of them. All we know for sure is that he was on campus that evening, and then he wasn't. Once again, very much like Michael Negretti and Joshua Guimond. So some questions that I had. Well, first of all, what exactly? Now, you should know. Hello, Unfounders. Oh, look who's here. Cherie making an appearance. Everybody say hi, Cherie. Cherie, we haven't talked in a while. Ink and innings. Yeah, your Astros aren't doing so hotly. I've been watching, Cherie. I've been watching your Astros. I've been watching them. I saw their record. They need some help. Cherie, they need some help. But going back to this analysis, now you should know, as crazy as it sounds, the woman who has done this work over the past so many years believes it's very likely that Ronald got recruited into the CIA. And the reason she thinks this is because this psychology prof, remember Ronald had dropped this class, had been working for the military, doing things with his hypnosis and such, just so you know. She thinks that instead of, he got out of going into the military by agreeing to be taken in by the CIA and working for them instead. Like I said, just so you know. I will continue with my own analysis. What I would want to know is, well, what exactly happened in the psychology class? Why did he drop it? Like I said, this is 73 years ago. I don't know how you'd ever find this out, but just saying. What exactly happened in this class? Why did he drop it? Did he drop any other classes? Was he getting a bad grade? Did he fail a class? Did he not like the professor? Want to know more about this? This whole thing about this disturbance that I read, did it actually happen, or is this somebody just trying to find a reason that he would have left the building? To me, it sounds like conjecture, just a theory and not a fact. I would need to know more about that. I need to know more about the roommate situation. How did they become roommates? I'm sure that's maybe covered in one of those other podcasts. But I really want to know about that. Of course, a lot of times people can pick their own roommates. Is this what happened here? You know, like when I went to Grove City, I didn't know my freshman roommate before I went there. And then my sophomore roommate was a friend of mine. The first half of junior year was a friend of mine. And then he transferred out and I got some stranger who was an idiot. And then my senior year was a friend of mine, my years in school. Is this the same situation that Ronald had with this roommate? Were they friends or were they just randomly put together? I'd also want to know, given where his room was, it sounds like it was on the second floor, given that it was 225. Well, how many dorms would he'd had to have passed to get from his dorm to getting out of the building? And in the evening, would not have people seen him, you would think. So I'd want to know, of course, the building's torn down now, but I'd want to know more about that. Is it possible, would it have been possible to leave the building without anybody seeing him? You know, I lived in a dorm my senior year where my dorm was on ground floor. Actually, it was in the basement, and my windows were at ground level. I could open up one of the windows and just crawl right out onto the grass. Just saying. Doesn't sound like he could have done that. I would want to know what his frat brothers thought. Being that he was part of this fraternity, I'm guessing some of them were interviewed at the time. What did they think? Did he have a mentor or something? You should know about the dead fish. That was some freshman's idea of doing this. But what I would want to know is, well, did anybody see him doing this? What was this, some freshman pledging the fraternity and was ordered to do that? You know, and as I've learned, I have one of my best friends. His son is now in a fraternity. I know about some things that, you know, his son had to do and was doing to get into this fraternity. None, you know, I no sound, no sound. And that is one heck of a way if I'm going to have to, don't anybody go. I want to finish this. I'll be right back. I'll be right back. No. No, that's not going to work. Oh, now it seems to be working now. I can see the green. You're back. Yeah, I don't know what happened. I have no idea. All right, let me finish this. I'm about out of time anyway. All right, my analysis. This is a very common type of disappearance to me. This just seems like a walk-off. The CIA stuff, it all sounds crazy to me. You know, the CIA does hire people the good old-fashioned way through resumes and everything, right? Even back in the 1950s. Thing is, I think it's the same then as it is now. Once again, I don't care if it's Michael Negretti, what year did he go missing, or Joshua Guimond. I think it's all a function of the same thing. You know, I also think if people didn't create these crazy stories like the CIA and everything else, more of these would be solved. You know, he staged this disappearance, but used a book from a class he no longer was taking. This seems unlikely to me. The dead fish was done by a freshman. The blood testing, was that really what he was doing? Could it be that he could have gotten some girl pregnant? And maybe this was like a way to test if he was actually the father. I'm open to that idea, I guess. On the other hand, as I think some of you have seen, you know, people, when they start getting, you know, really particular about their health and germs and everything, you know, it could be some sort of OCD or paranoia. It could be sign of some sort of mental health issue going on. Of course, as we all know now, all of his stuff being left behind, wallet and everything else, keys, all of that stuff being left behind, every time, it's always a bad sign. The problem is that I think that if he were abducted from his dorm, somebody would have noticed, I think. So there's that. The amnesia idea, as many of you know who, you know, her YouTube and Patreon supporters, I've talked about this in the Found episodes. I have a high degree of doubtfulness about all this so dissociative fugue and all of that. All of it. So an accident, of course, if he were a woman, this would be totally different. I'd be much more open to the idea that he did get abducted somehow. Of course, another issue that I have is frat members make members do weird things. Could that have been what was going on here with him? Did he get involved in something that he was supposed to be doing for the fraternity and it went bad? What's also been brought up in certain places regarding this disappearance is that, was he secretly gay? And this has come up with Stephen Kocher, Joshua Guimond, on and on and on and on and on and on. And, I've gotten to the point, you hear about all, that missing guy must have, I'm a straight guy. Are there any other straight guys anymore? Every straight guy that goes missing, well, it's very mysterious. Are we sure he wasn't gay? I will tell you, here's my analysis. Here's what I think happened. What does catch my attention is that he was a wrestler. I don't know if he was wrestling in college, but it seems he was a wrestler earlier in his life, to the point enough that he had what they call cauliflower ear. I don't know if you've ever seen it, because when they, wrestle and your head's on the mat and your ears getting, pressed against the floor and people grabbing at it, wrestlers and things. Sometimes you see this with like MMA fighters. They have these weird looking ears. These are the kind of ears that Ronald had. And what I start thinking is, if he was wrestling enough that he was just 19 years old and already had this, I'm starting to wonder if he could have had some sort of head injury, PTSD, or as, that, what do they call that, the disease with the long name that, now they, people who get concussions and they trust their brains after they've been in the NFL. Could he have had that? This is where my mind goes. To me, it seems, between, getting his blood typed, if that's actually what happened, dropping the psychology class, these different things. I wonder if he had was starting to have some sort of brain injury. And I'm wondering if the dead fish could have pushed him over the edge. Yes, it was just a harmless prank, but to somebody who is starting to have some sort of mental health issue and doesn't know what's going on and how to handle it, that kind of prank, my opinion, I'm not a doctor, I just play one on this live show. I think it would have if you just come back and it's there, I think that would freak somebody like that out. It wouldn't be a reaction, oh, great, guys, funny, and I'm going to get you back, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that. For a person who's already struggling with their mental health, I think that this could cause that person to freak out. Now, of course, in 1953 terms, they wouldn't even think about this. And I'm also wondering, did he drop the psychology class because he knew he was starting to have these issues and was afraid by continuing to take the class that it would just freak him out more about what he thought was happening to him? So I can't help but think that what I said about Michael Negretti and Joshua Guimond, I'm thinking that Ronald Tammen just took off, but I think in his case, I think it was a mental health issue. I don't think that was what it was with Joshua Guimond and Michael Negretti. But I think in this case, I think you can make a very strong argument that he had some sort of mental health crisis and took off, triggered by the dead fish in his bed. I think there has to be some connection between the dead fish and him going missing, and I don't think it's one of violence. But the person who's worked on this the most, this woman, Jennifer Wenger, thinks he got recruited by the CIA. You could pick my choice or her choice, or maybe you have a different theory. Fine by me. All right, we're running over. I'll get right to this. This Friday, new disappearance. We're going to Waldorf, Maryland. I think this is only the second disappearance we've featured in that state. For the disappearance of Dawn Holt, Holt. She went missing on April 25th of 1996, coming up 30 years. Her daughter, Samantha, is the guest. She was only 3 years old when this happened. Dawn had her problems, drug issues, hanging around with the wrong people. But in an effort to get out of some charges against her, she became an informant for the Maryland State Police. And it was while being an informant for them that she went missing. She was here in Florida to get away, kind of those things. Went back to Maryland, paid for by some drug friend of hers. She was staying at an Econo Lodge in Waldorf. And then she was never seen again. So you can start looking that up. It is on the Charlie Project. It is on NamUs. Dawn Holt, Holt, Waldorf, Maryland, April 25th, 1996. Samantha, her daughter, is the guest. She did a spectacular interview, of course. That's all I got for all of you tonight. Got everything. Ronald Tammen, the UFO stuff, the Ring video. I think I got everything done tonight that I wanted. How about that? That's the way we roll here. Thank you all for showing up tonight. Give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. Cherie, so happy to see you tonight. Charlie, good to see you as well. Say hi to your sons out there. Everybody keep your heads on swivels. Do not end up on my podcast. Good night.